Welcome to APQC's Process Improvement Spotlight, where we talk to leaders and innovators involved in process improvement and BPM. Today, APQC's Executive Director of Membership and Research Services, Ron Webb, is joined by Theo Priestley, one of the industry's leading technology evangelists and BPM influencers.
What are some of the biggest hurdles that organizations are experiencing when they connect people to the right technology to improve their processes? Where have you seen it go right? What are the things that people do when it really goes wrong? Common mistakes, things like that. And I know that you don't really care, but you can hold back the names to protect the guilty.
The biggest hurdles, I guess, are the experience of the people involved and their understanding of what they're trying to achieve. And that ties down to the maturity of the organization when they're looking at technology. I've come across organizations where what they do is they typically have a wish list of things that they want to achieve with particular technologies, especially in the case of BPM. And they've done a kind of desk-based research. So they've done the rounds on the internet and they've seen what all the buzzwords are, and they write it down and they maybe consult a few papers and things like that. And they think, right, this is what we need for our organization because the trends say we need it. But what they don't actually sit down and think about is, well, actually, what is our attitude towards process? How mature are we as an organization? How do we treat process? How do we, what do we think of it in the organization? What do our people think of it? Have we even documented anything, or is it still sitting in people's drawers and people's heads? So when they start to engage with technology vendors, if they don't have a clear idea of their own ability to use technology and software to help them improve processes, then really it's a bit of a blank check for technology vendors to come and present the sky's the limit, basically, and bamboozle them a lot with industry analysts speak, the latest buzzwords. And what invariably happens is they get sold a Rolls Royce when really all they really need is a Mini. And I use that analogy quite a lot in that, a lot of organizations, all they want to do is nip down to the shops for a pint of milk or a newspaper, and so they're sold the Ferrari and the Rolls Royces of the BPM world, and it's a short round trip that they need to do. So they've got a lot of technology, they've got a lot of power behind them, but they don't know how to use it, they don't know how to wield the technology, and that's when the frustrations start. The business become frustrated because they were promised a lot of things, both from the technology vendor, but also from the people buying the technology in the business themselves. They don't have the in-house expertise to wield it. What should be a continual exercise of process improvement and growing the technology with the process mindset suddenly just becomes a one-off project, and then it dies a death. And then 12 months, 24 months, someone else new comes along, has the same idea, completely unaware of what happened before, and the whole thing goes round in the cycle again. So those are the kind of sort of biggest hurdles, I would say. There's the education piece and there's the maturity piece. The education around what is BPM and what you're trying to achieve, and the maturity piece as to what is our attitude to process and really how mature are we as an organization to think about process and where are we in that cycle.
Right. And how does because we've talked a lot, and I know that you've written a lot about, silos and integration. I've seen where, silo mentalities can be good and also can be bad for organizations. It's usually, I've seen it where it's good, where they don't try and bite off, BPM at the enterprise level, that they have a group or an area that's really got a strong flavor for it. They have that mindset, and they start using BPM really, really effectively to get their work done. doesn't impact any other area of the organization, but it can lead to now this, effort starting to spread and be more successful in the organization elsewhere because they've gotten some good, solid successes within that group or area. But then again, you may just be, automating a bunch of silos within the organization, and you're not impacting anything overall. How do you react to that?
I guess it depends on the size of the organization. It's very easy to do a kind of proof of concept in one area in a small organization because you'll find that there's a lot of centralized control. Although there are Chinese walls and what appears to be silos in smaller organizations, there are still, the C-suite is still very much in control of what goes on. In larger organizations, it's more difficult. So if you have a global retail bank, for example, you'll find that divisions are basically autonomous. They are given a budget, they are given headcounts, they are given targets, and how they achieve that is relatively up to them. And so what happens invariably is, although you might have one division or area who does process improvement and who implements a technology and does it really well, and tries to make that as a bit of a showcase, you'll find that other divisions are basically doing things themselves without any consultation or without any sort of joined up thinking, and that's when you get pockets of different implementations of different software all doing the same thing basically. So in one area you'll have TIBCO, for example, or Nimbus. In another area you'll have CaseWise, somewhere else you'll have Aris, somewhere else you'll have iGraphics, because there isn't that kind of sort of joined up thinking in larger organization, and it's harder to control. And I guess that's where, centers of excellence come in, because there has to be some kind of, hub and spoke model towards a process attitude. If you want to sort of recycle that question again, I've kind of sort of gone off on another tangent, I think.
No, well, tell me if you agree with this, that when you have some, those centers of excellence and those hub and spokes that evolve, integration becomes, and the ability to integrate those different hubs together to have, some commonality and some, everybody headed in the right direction becomes even more key. Do you agree?
Yes, yes to a certain degree, because I'm actually of the mindset where we are now in an age where control is becoming more decentralized and back into individual responsibilities. So I'm a great sort of supporter of, flexible and networked organizations. So there are, it's not so much of a hub and spoke, it's more of a sort of node model where there are people are given the flexibility and control to almost be the master of their own work, and they can pull on other resources as they see fit to complete that work, to transfer the knowledge, to draw on different knowledge aspects, and that includes process and execution as well. So where we are now, between and where we were maybe sort of 10, 15 years ago is I'm seeing a bit of a shift. There's more of a, you could call it the sort of social networking aspect, I guess. There is less of the, I would say, hardwired integration from a hierarchy point of view, and more towards integration from a social networking point of view. So the organization is seen as an organic creature, as it were. It's flexible, it moves, and it changes with the times. It's adaptive, whereas before, if you were building a sort of center of excellence from a hub and spoke model, you're tied to hierarchy. It's less reactive, it's more rigid, there's more layers of management and control to sort of fight through to get decision making done. And I think there's more of a network feature going on now. So there's still integration in terms of, in terms of different people different ideas, different processes being integrated into different systems and divisions and silos, but it's more from a network perspective rather than a linear fashion.
Okay.
If you look up, prime example is, it's flat organizational structures now that are starting to win a bit of, win through the business sort of organization and mentality. Now, if you look at lateral communication and things like Valve software, there's a lot written about Valve software in terms of how their organization is extremely flat. Everyone has control. There's no such, I guess, emphasis placed on role titles and hierarchy and people work as as distinct units for a sort of common good. Those kind of sort of structures are starting to form in the organizations now, and the advent of all these socialized processes and tools like Tibber and Yammer that promote people to be able to sort of cross network and draw in other process expertise in their own work. That's becoming more prevalent, and of course that's actually going to change the organizational makeup from the inside out.
Right. So even if you do have a hub and spoke or a node, there's going to be this social network of people that are getting work done that's going to kind of rise above that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, there are tools that help you map out your own social demographics. Like Twitter maps and your Facebook social graphs and things like that. And that's exactly, if you took a snapshot of your own reach within an organization, within a social network context, you'll find that that's exactly how people's social graph from an organizational perspective really looks like. So you'll find that although you may have a manager or a supervisor that sits above you, you actually reach out to 20, 30 different people to actually get your job done, and none of those actually, your connections don't actually touch anything to do with your manager or even those reporting lines. So hierarchy and all those structure charts are almost becoming a bit of a dying breed and a sort of paid lip service now, only for the sake of job titles, whereas the way the work is actually performed is more of a network basis. You've got your own business social graph, as it were, and your own sort of network reach. So that's probably something that you might want to include actually in this conversation is a typical picture of a Twitter map, how someone's network of influence sort of extends from their point out to other people and where their network extends. And it's the same for LinkedIn as well. I think LinkedIn have got their own sort of inbuilt sort of graph kind of sort of generator where you can see how your sphere of influence grows, the number of connections you have and the number of connections your connections have. And that's exactly the way that an organization really works. But people still get hung up on the whole hierarchy kind of sort of idea. And we need to sort of do a mind shift when we think about process, from moving away from hierarchy and into a sort of network model.
Right. And Theo, I totally forgot to introduce Ralph. He's here with me, and I think he's got a question.
Okay. Theo, when you talk about the net, as the hierarchy sort of disappears and it sort of goes away, what's sort of the challenges that companies face as the hierarchy becomes less important?
I guess, well, you've got your political challenges, which will be the hardest thing to overcome, which are people unwilling to actually give up their silos or their sort of ivory towers, if you want to call it that. So there will be that, as you move to a more sort of a networked span of control and influence, people, the middle management layers will actually start to fear that they will no longer have as much control over their own sort of divisions and their own areas as before. And I think what people need to sort of work towards is, although, they will be the ultimate decision makers, But that, the way the work is actually executed doesn't detract from that, they don't lose control of making the ultimate decisions. What the network kind of sort of model does is actually make the work more efficient and more transparent, and it's done more effectively, and it removes the need for almost 4I, 6I principles, and then being drawn into every single supervisory kind of sort of role, every sort of small decision that needs to be made to move the process on into another sort of fashion. I guess it's the fear of losing control will be the biggest hurdle, to be honest. In that respect, in that context. I'm trying to sort of think it through. If I was a manager and someone said to me, we're no longer going to operate from a sort of hierarchy, or we're starting to sort of move towards, other people having more control, I would probably start fearing for just how much control and decision making I really have over this. If people are able to draw in expertise from all over the business, but the way I look at that as well is it's an opportunity to actually expand my own influence across the organization as well, because I'm no longer tied to a specific organizational structure. I can actually spread my own talents across the business and make my own connections and expand my own sort of sphere of influence, as it were. So even higher up the chain, a manager could actually help influence decision making across the way rather than just up and down the way in his own silo. So there's the perception of the fear of losing control, but actually you would turn that around and use it as an opportunity to broaden your influence across the organization.
Okay. May have time for one last question, Ralph. Anything you got?
With, as you say, with people as the hierarchy disappears and they can do things across the organization, what sort of challenges does it present to connect people with the right process technology to help them after the silos sort of start to break away, because it's not as focused maybe on one process, and you're trying to find the right tool that can help a broader range of people. What's the challenge in that?
That's when you start. Okay, right. Well, the technology that you need to look at, it no longer becomes a kind of sort of content management tool where you sit and document processes to the nth degree, and it becomes static, because that really doesn't help that kind of sort of model at all. What you really need is a process technology that allows you to, first of all, execute the work that you're doing, so you have a degree of process automation involved, but also something that taps into the IT infrastructure that allows you to communicate across the business, what you're doing, so that people are aware and can almost subscribe to the work that you're performing, so they become alerted to things that may happen that affect your work, that they can have a hand in. So in the same way that you subscribe to someone's feed or someone's RSS feed because you're actually interested in what they're talking about, you can also do the same with their own work, because you may have come from a different organization and you have a similar background, but you're no longer working in that core process, but you'd still like to be able to lend a hand, and you'd still want them to know that you're actually available to draw expertise upon. So if you are processing, say, an insurance claim, I know that I could draw on you because you have 20 years background experience, but you're now working in accountancy or in the accounting or finance department and completely away from claims. I'm still able to sort of draw you into the process to ask for your expertise and opinion, and you can help me out with a particular, customer query or, a complaint or something like that, and I can get my job done more effectively if I draw you in quickly for a quick interaction. We solve the problem together. It's there given to the customer. The customer is then happy with the conclusion, and the case is closed. Whereas before, what would normally happen is the process stops. We write a letter to the customer waits. We have to write out to, to an underwriter or something like that. We have to wait for them to come back. There's all this kind of sort of toing and froing, and the process is very linear. Whereas now, using these kind of sort of tools that allow us to tap into all this latent information that sits in the organization, we can quickly access it, solve the problem, get it done, and then present it back to the customer, in rapid fashion. And it's the ability for these tools to be able to tap into all that latent information. It's like, I think from your last process conference, we talked about tacit and explicit. And it's all that tacit information that actually sits in the organization that people normally, because of the way that process is defined and the way that the technologies work, is very constrained, it's linear, and they're not allowed to interact. Whereas now, with all these process technologies that are integrating social layers and are tapping into, basically allowing other people to subscribe and tap into all the processes that exist, we can actually start to draw out that tacit knowledge and actually exploit it from a network perspective. So again, using this whole Twitter and Facebook kind of sort of social analogy, you subscribe to someone because you're interested in what they say, and you can also speak to them and draw upon their knowledge. And it's the same with process now. Only these tools that are coming out of the woodwork are helping us expose that a lot more.